This is Gemara in Gittin Daf Yomi, and we're holding on the bottom of Yud Aleph Amid Beis. We are 4 lines from the bottom, and we just finished, as the Gemara said, Banu lemachloikas Rav Elazar Avir Rabbanan. And now the Gemara proves this detail, that this is indeed a machlokes Rav Elazar and the Rabbanan, which will be a quick chazara and will remind us where we are holding Dittinan, as we learned in the Mishnah, 4 lines from the bottom. Someone's picking peah, and he says, it's not for me, it's for the ploini, the certain ani. Rav Eliezer he acquires it for that ani. No, he did not acquire for that ani, but rather, he has to give it to the first ani he finds. And so therefore says the Gemara, what's this machlokes? Whether Hataif is the Balchayv and Makash Chav La'achirim is Kana. I'm grabbing for Ani A. It's Chav La'achirim for other Aniyim. So can I do that or not? Seemingly the Gemara is teaching us, Rav Eliezer says yes. And the Chachamim say no. So says the Gemara, Amar Amimar, V'Temer Apapos, we turn over to Yud Beis. Amir Aleph says Amimar V'Temer Apapa, Tel Malohi. Maybe there is no Raya. Why not? Can look come Rav Eliezer also. Maybe Rav Eliezer only says his din over there. Why? A classical idea that we find all over the place, that really you can't be Zaycha. But over here, every person who's picking the leket shicha and peah, at some level has a sheikhist. How does every person have a sheikhist to leket shicha and peah? That sounds ridiculous. Says the Gemara, you know why? Because the migu, if he wants, the bayi mafkele nechasei, if anyone wants, you can take all your possessions. We're not advising this necessarily, but you can take all your possessions and be mafker them. And because you're able to be mafker your possessions, v'have'ani, then you could be a poor person. V'chazilei, and then you would be able to get the matnas aniyim. You would be able to get it. And therefore, since you could get it for yourself, you could get it for the other guy. Over here, but in our case, maybe not. So maybe this is not a raya from this machlokes Rav Eliezer and Rabbanan, because maybe that's a special din by aniyim, since we all could potentially become an ani. Now the Gemara says further, and similarly, maybe the Rabbanan said over there, you can't do it. Specifically, why? It didn't leket shicha and peah. T'chsev, it says in the Torah, lo salake la'ani. Lo salake lo la'ani. You cannot collect for something else. Leket shicha is a peah. Is a din that you have to do for yourself. Avalach aloi. But over here, maybe not. And now the Gemara just wraps up loose ends. Rav Elazar, hay lo salake ma'avle. What does Rav Elazar do? Lo salake. Says the Gemara, mi bayile for a different din. Lahazil ani al shalai. That an ani, even an ani, has to give his own leket shicha and peah. So says the Gemara, we do not have a raya that a toifis malchayv shemakim shechav la'achirim is going to be this machlokes. Now the Gemara continues by quoting the next part of the Mishnah. Shim yirtza shaloi lazin. So now we're going to start a almost completely sidebar discussion, a din in Eved, a din in Isha, as we'll see as follows. Says the Gemara, Yud Beis and Aleph, 8 lines down, Shemas Mina. You know, you learn from the Mishnah. A master is allowed to tell an Eved, you have an obligation to work for me. You're my Eved. I bought you. You have to work for me. But guess what? Eini zancha. I'm not going to feed you. From our Mishnah, it seems one is allowed to do that. As we saw that it's going to be always objectively a schos for the Eved to go free. So Gemara wants to explain, you know why it's a schos for the Eved to go free? Because he potentially can be put into a terrible situation that he has to work and he doesn't get fed. So says the Gemara, from our Mishnah, we have a raya to a shayla that we have all over Shas, that a master is able to require his Eved to work for him, even though the master himself is not going to feed the Eved. Says the Gemara, no raya. No, the case here is such that the master said, listen, you have to work, beseder, work, and whatever you make, you will feed yourself. But I'm not feeding you. So maybe that's the case of the Mishnah. But still, it's going to be a schos for the Eved to go free. But we do not necessarily have a raya that the master is allowed to make his Eved work without supporting him. It says the Gemara, 1 second. We had two cases in the Mishnah, if you remember. We had a case of Eved and a case of Isha. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Now we have to follow this through. The Kavasoi Gabi Isha, if we follow this through, what's similar by the case of a woman? Tamar La, that he tells his wife, I'm not going to support you. Let your earnings be your wages. So, but if that's true, Isha my lie. So then why in the case of the Isha does it not work? If in both cases it's the same thing. If in both cases the Eved works, the Isha works. They both make money. And that money they make supports themselves. So why do we have a clear difference in din between the Isha and the Eved? Why by the Eved do we say it's a schos for him to go free, but by the Isha not? It should be the same thing. Answers the Gemara, Isha b'deloi safka. The reason is, the case of the woman is, she doesn't make enough of her own money, and therefore the husband has to bring out and give him from himself. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. So why don't we say the same thing by the Eved? Answers the Gemara, a fundamental idea of an Eved, which does not apply to a wife. If an Eved can't make enough money to even just support himself, to his master, of what usage is he? As Rashi says, an Eved that's not worth the bread that he eats. What's usage is he to the master? And therefore comes out a startling din. Someone tells his Eved, you make whatever you make and you eat yourself, you feed yourself, Says Rashi, 5 lines into the narrow lines, the master does not have an obligation to add on extra money. He's allowed to let the Eved be. But the Eved doesn't have enough money to live. Because the master doesn't have to feed him and lose from his own. However, Rashi continues, but a woman, of course, this is not true. A husband has a ksuba, which is the obligation to support his wife. So says the Gemara, that's why we see this fundamental din. For a woman to be divorced is not going to be good for her. Because at the very least, obviously there's a lot more, but at the very least she's getting supported by her husband, which is not necessarily going to be true by the Eved. So the Gemara again is going to continue trying to bring rayos. It's this idea of whether the master is allowed to say to Eved, I say me, work for me, but I am not supporting you. So Tashema tries the Gemara again, 8 lines from the Y lines. Eved shekalari miklat in Rabba Chayiv lezaynai. If an Eved accidentally kills someone, the halacha is he goes to Ari Miklat. The Eved goes to Ari Miklat. The master is not obligated to support him. Not only that, not only that, but the Maise Yodayim, that which the Eved makes, goes to the master. Says the Gemara, from here we have a clear proof. Shema Mina, what do we see from here? We see from this case that the Eved is in Ari Miklat. The Eved is not getting supported. And the master says clearly, whatever you make goes to me. Seemingly a clear proof that a master is able to tell Eved, whatever you make is mine, and I'm not supporting you. Says the Gemara, no. The case is that the master allowed Eved to keep his own stuff. Ask the Gemara, the obvious kashi, if that is true, Maise Yadav, Amayla Rabbi. If this is true, so why the Maise Yadayim going to the master? Why do the Brisa say that not only could the master do this, but he doesn't even have to feed him? Says the Gemara, lahadafa, means the excess of Maise Yadayim. Says the Gemara, hadafa, pshita. Of course the excess goes to the master and the Eved does not keep that on his own. Says the Gemara, no, gishmaka havamina. Mao the time I would have thought, kima the chileslei, lo yahivlei. What's the halacha? If the Eved doesn't make any money, lo yahivlei. We're going within the tzad right now that the master does not have to feed him. So the chileslei, lo yahivlei, ki islei. So now all of a sudden that he makes a little bit extra. Maybe lo lishkaminei. Maybe just like I don't have to feed him at all, so to the extra I'm not going to get. Maybe that's the trade-off. So Kamash Malon, then no, that at least the extra I'm going to get on the last narrow line. So says the Gemara, okay, beautiful pshat, but according to this, Ari Miklat, what does that have anything to do with Ari Miklat? Meaning we thought Ari Miklat is some relevance to the case, but it's coming out, has nothing to do with Ari Miklat. Coming out, it's a regular case that the Eved is told that and the excess, that the Eved is being supported by the master, and that the excess is going to the Eved. Says the Gemara, you know what the Havamim is? That is a din by Ari Miklat says you have to support your Eved, which we think means maybe you have to give him excessive, maybe you have to give the Eved more in the case of Ari Miklat than usual. Kamash Malan, that the master does not have to. But now ask the Gemara 1 second. Seifa. Aval ish, she calls Ari Miklat, that if a woman is sent Ari Miklat, again, the same parallel between the Eved and the Isha. The husband has to support her Michlal. What does it seem? That he did not say to her that she takes her own support with her earnings. The Amrla Baila Amay Chayiv, says the Gemara, because why? Because if her own earnings are that which she is using, so why is the husband obligated? Says the Gemara, you got it all wrong. Really, it is the case where he said your earnings should be your support. But the woman doesn't make enough money. 1 second, the Seifa says explicitly that if he said to her, your Ma'aseh Yadayim should be your Mezainis, Rasha, he's allowed to, B'chal de Reisha, to Lo Yamar La. Sounds like the Reisha is not that case. Ha'chi Gamer, says the Gemara. If she makes enough money, Rashai, says the Gemara, Shkoyach. Misabek is my lememra. What's the chiddush if she makes enough money? That's pashit. Explains the Gemara, Ma'udatema, I would have thought, called Kavaidai Bas Melech Panima. Says the Gemara, I would have thought that, what do you mean? Requiring the woman to go out to work? Kamash Malan, that is the chiddush. And we go up to Rashi, and Rashi fills in an important detail over here. Ma'udatema called Kavaidai Bas Melech Panima. Call Yisrael B'nei Malachim. Panima is Sinua. Ve'im Darka Lotzis Ulisaviv Bir She'enai Misham. That's what Rashi says. That you would think that the reason is that why? That where is this woman right now? She's in Ari Miklat. She's not used to being in Ari Miklat. Vein Makir Naisa, they don't know her. Lavi La Malacha Bebeisa. Elam Ki Misaveves Be'yer, she has to go and peddle her herself. Limsa Malacha Lishtaker. That's the reason. But again, to have a regular job would not seem to be a problem according to the Gemara. So says the Gemara, Lema Kitanoi. So we try to bring rayas back and forth. All our rayas didn't work. So as Gemaras classically do, says the Gemara, you know what? Let's try to say it's a machlokes tanoim as to whether a husband is allowed to say Simai Sidechem Zanesecha, as to whether a husband is allowed to say your earnings should be that which support yourself. Says the Gemara, we're 10 lines from the bottom of Yud Beis and Beis, Lema Kitanoi. Rav Shimon Gamliel Oimer, says Rav Shimon Gamliel, Yochlev Elohim the Rabbi, B'shnei bat Sayres, the years of a famine, in the years of a famine, an Eved is allowed to tell his master, you know what? Either support me, or let me go free. V'chachamim Oimrim, say the Chachamim, nothing doing. No, Harshos Biad Rabbi, the master chooses what he wants to do. So says the Gemara, Ma'ila Ba'al Kamifli. What's this machlokes of Lazar the Chachamim? Demar Savar Yachal, Demar Savar Eini Yachal. Chachamim old Yachal. The master is allowed to tell that to the Eved that I'm taking your wages and I'm not feeding you. Everything's up to the master. Whereas the Rav Lazar says no. Says Rav Tizra. Hai Barneseni Oitzina Lecheiros. What did the Brisa say that the Eved could say either support me or set me free? Oi Barneseni. Oi tell me Maisi Yodai Barnesasi. If we're talking about a case in which the master is taking his Maisi Yodayim, is that which he makes. So what should the Eved have said? Either support me or let me at least give my own wages. Mi Bayalei. Question number 1. Question number 2. Why? This has nothing to do with a famine. This is any time. So says the Gemara, you know what's going on over here? You're right. The master is not taking the Ma'aseh Yadayim. The case is that it's supposed to go to the Eved. He doesn't make enough. So the Eved could say either feed me or let me go free. Why? Let people see me, and then they'll have mercy and they'll support me. For Rabbanan and Savri, no. Rabbanan and Savri, let's go a little bit deep into the psyche of people. Man de merachim b'nei chayri, avinami rachumi merachmi. Say the chachamim, he who gives tzedakah is going to give it always. Whether you're an eved, whether you're a free person, it's not going to be the determining characteristic. There is no reason why the master should free you. Tashamas, the Gemara tries again 3 lines from the bottom. I'm sorry, the highlighting stopped working. Someone who's makdish, the yadayim of his evet, he says, the hands of my evet should go to the Beis HaMikdash. What's the halacha? The evet has to work. And loive, he borrows. Upayreya, oisa evet, loive, he borrows v'oichel and he eats. V'oisa, he works. Payreya, and then he pays back. And everyone's wondering, 1 second, we just said that as Maisi Yadayim go to the Beis HaMikdash, how does he work and pay back? The Gemara will deal with that on the base. But says the Gemara, Shema no, what do we see clearly? Because the whole design over here is that the Eved is not allowed to work, and the master is not supporting him, he's making him go begging. Says Gemara, if the case is Ma'ila Mezainis, Lamai Lava, ask the Gemara as we turn over to your base and base, so why did the Brisa say that the Eved should borrow and eat? What do you mean borrow and eat? The master is giving him food to eat. Says the Gemara, lahadafa. It means for the excess. V'lei malei, so says the Gemara, I don't understand. V'lei malei hektish, why doesn't hektish say? So it's going to come out that for the excess, hektish is losing, because he's borrowing, eating, and then working and paying back for that which he ate. But he's just getting an extra burger, an extra donut. So hektish told him, Arashta till now, Sagi lei adafa. Till now, you survived. You didn't need that extra donut. V'ashtanami, tiskilach v'layadafa. It should be the same thing, and I shouldn't have to. Hektish shouldn't lose out. Has the Gemara, no. Hektish gufei nichle, the Beis HaMikdash wins. Why? Why? Because now the Eved is going to work better. Says the Gemara, the Kash that we mentioned, Aisu Paireya, Kama Magdishle. What do you mean he works and he pays back? Every bit that he works goes straight to Beis HaMikdash. Says the Gemara 6 lines down, he pays him a base, means he works at teeny little increments which do not go to Beis HaMikdash, but as they add up, then he'll be able to pay back his loans. Hachinam Mistavra says the Gemara, this is logical. He works and he eats. Because if not, what's usage is his Eved going to be? So says the Gemara. So if this whole case, now that we figured out what the case is that the master is feeding this Eved, and he's not able to not support him, that's going to be case number 1. And this case of Rav, when Rav said, you're allowed to. So to come out to Machlokes, Rav and Tanakama, is this detail whether the master could say work for me and but I'm not supporting you. But if our case he's not actually giving him and he's able to say work for me, I'm not supporting you. What's the whole taina? What do you mean? No, we have our first raya, Eino Yachal Shmamina. So the Gemara proves that we must have a clear raya that the master is not able to say ini yachalemer, say mi v'nizancha, but rather the master has an obligation to support the Eved, but rather he could say keep your earnings for your own support. Tashema, with this we're going to conclude, which is a little bit of an interesting Gemara, as we just had one raya, Shema mina eino yachal. Now we're going to have another raya. Someone chops off the hand of his Eved, of the Eved of his friend. No, you say Shiftoi, Rabbi. There's different damages you have to pay. So one of them is Shiftoi, the Eved resting up. You have to pay the medical bills. The Rabbi you pay to the master. And the Eved himself, where does he get money from? Tzedakah. Says the Gemara, it's very clear that the master is getting all the money for this Eved. And even though the master is getting all the money for the Eved, it said that where does Eved get fed? From tzedakah. So clearly the master is not feeding the Eved, he's still getting his Maisi Yadayim, he's getting whatever he works. Okay, he's not getting what he really works, he's getting that in the form of the form of the payment for the medical bills, but it's the same thing. Says Gemara, no raya the case is he gives him food. What does it mean? The Eved should take money from tzedakah. La dafa for the excess. What does it mean nizan? It should mean that's his support. So here we have a raya that the master could say, me work for me and I'm not going to support you. So now, fascinating, as we have conflicting Gemaras, conflicting rayas. Usually the Gemara now would come along and the Gemara would say, what's going on over here? And the Gemara doesn't. The Gemara leaves it. Just one last piece of Gemara to wrap up the day. Amar Mar. We said, nice and shifta rabbi the rabbi. Shifta pshita. Refuasa yitzricha. You know what the chiddush is? That you give the medical bills to the master. Why? What's the chiddush? Refuasa dideyu. What do you mean? The Eved himself needs the refuah. He needs to pay the doctor. What are we giving it to the master? So says the Gemara, why Dubai has to be? He has to be healed. Says the Gemara, Gavaldik chiddush. Lo yitzricha adam du'ala chamisha yami. Really, the Eved needed 5 days of medical treatments. And then they went to a doctor and he said, I can give you a stronger treatment. And you'll be healed in 3 days. So who's the one that's going to do the extra pay? The Eved. So you would think maybe the Eved gets that extra bit of money. Kamashlan, that's the chiddush. That little bit is going to go to the master. We're going to stop over here by Tanya, in which now the Gemara is going to wrap back up the loose ends from our Mishnah the next year. B'siyata dishmaya.